We demystify what goes on behind the therapy room door. Join us on this voyage of discovery and co-creative conversations. This is the Therapy Show, Behind Closed Doors podcast, with Bob Cooke and Jacci Jones.
Welcome back to the next episode of the Therapy Show Behind Closed Doors with myself, Jacci Jones, and the wonderful Mr. Bob Cooke.
Hi!
We're on 198 now, Bob.
Oh, 2 to go!
I know, he's getting excited. We'll have to do something
excited
special.
and getting stimulated.
So what we're doing in this one is creating a therapeutic toolbox for effective therapy.
Oh, Jackie, when I first came into psychotherapy, let's go step back a bit before I came into psychotherapy training to be a psychotherapist. When I went into therapy, right? So let's say when I went into therapy, I wanted to understand myself, and I really suppose in some ways wanted a toolbox to help me fix myself.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about that, but I just wanted to say that. So, but in the sort of world of training to be a psychotherapist, which I started in 1985, in 1984, God, it's such a long time ago. It's like another world and lifetime. But in 1984, when counselling and psychotherapy were sort of, I don't know, words not many people speak about, and there certainly wasn't any training in those areas, I went on probably one of the first counselling courses, and definitely one of the worst I've ever been on, in 1984. And they had a phrase there, and that was eclecticism. In other words, and what that meant, eclecticism, hard for somebody who's got dyslexia, that was the idea that you would choose from different psychotherapy disciplines or models to inform your work as a psychotherapist. Nowadays, people like to use the word integrative.
Yeah.
Back then, it was back then. And I think this podcast is really talking about developing a toolbox, mainly from many of these different models or disciplines or our own particular trainings, to help us help our clients to go to where they need to go to in the for and service of healing.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah, me too. And it's about having, the accessibility or the training or whatever it is to help your client, to meet your client's needs, rather than just having one thing that you do, one trick pony or whatever that you keep repeating over and over again. I love the fact that there are so many different types of therapists out there, and I'm fascinated by all of them. Some of them I think I like, and some of them don't fit well with me. But to have an eclectic view of what works and what doesn't, I think is healthy as a therapist.
Oh, from that point of view and the point of view of holistic psychotherapy, I couldn't agree more. And whether it be from drama therapy, whether it be from existential therapy, whether it's from Gestalt psychotherapy, whether it's from the counselling world, whether it's from psychodrama, whether it's from sculpturing, whether it's from transactional analysis, whether it's from CBT, or wherever it's from.
Yeah.
I think it's good for therapists, certainly in the world of CPD and evolution of themselves in the service of clients, to borrow creative ideas.
Yeah.
And in fact, if we didn't do that, if we stayed in that one trick pony that you're talking about, not only would life be very boring for a therapist, but for a lot of clients, it would be the wrong approach.
Well, I think that's the thing. Yeah. I think we would be doing a disservice if that's how we were as therapists.
Absolutely. I'm 70. I'm in my 75th year. I won't even imagine what year you're in, dear, but I'm in the 55th year. And one of the wonders of being the age I am is that over a 38, 39-year career in the world of psychotherapy, I have a huge toolbox of wonderful creative ideas that I have created myself, but much more important, that I've got from many masters of psychotherapy.
I can imagine it's massive, Bob.
certainly is. That's what I like. I like to be the age I am from that frame of reference. Um, if I'd have just stayed with one frame of reference or one way of working, I think not only it wouldn't be effective for many, many clients, but I'd have got bored,
Yeah.
I think.
I think for me, I'm really pleased that I did do some person-centered counselling at a local college prior to starting training as a using transactional
Yes.
analysis. But it didn't fit for me. I don't know why it didn't. So transactional analysis is the basis for me of all my psychotherapy, and the other stuff is in addition to it or on top of or around, if that makes sense. So I'm really pleased that I've got the basics of transactional analysis,
Mm.
but
Mm.
then that allows me to build on and use other things.
Absolutely. And they're nearly always um, creative ideas to meet the clients and help the clients move to a place of healing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
clients have different defense systems. They have different styles of learning. They have different coping mechanisms. They have made different decisions. And to get to that place to help the client not only express those thoughts, but to go to the place of healing that needs to be, many different effective techniques can be used. Hypnotic induction, hypnosis, two-chair techniques. We could think of many, couldn't we?
Yeah,
Sculpturing from the world of drama therapy, um, art therapy, which I love, from the world of art therapy, psychodrama, um, many, many different ways to help us get to what often is called in TA the child ego state, but in perhaps other models, the unconscious process where most early decisions are made, and we need to get there to help people become more aware so they can take charge of their own destiny. There's so many effective creative tools around that we just need to do the reading and trust in our instincts to dip into them.
yeah. And I think it allows for individuality of the therapist and the client as well.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it always has to be in the service of the client, though,
Yeah, yeah,
not to be foisted on the client. You see, the problem comes in all this is when therapists decide to foist their techniques onto the client. That will never work because what will happen is the client will adapt, and
yeah,
then we know true healing from an adapted place. So it isn't about foisting techniques or tools. It's about using tools, maybe from different disciplines or whatever, in the service of the client within the relationship. So it's born out of the relationship between client and therapist rather than foisted on them.
yeah.
There's a huge difference.
Yeah, which you touched on earlier and said about CPD, continuous professional development. And I think that's a
Mm.
really important thing for us to use as therapists to look at alternatives or different things or new creative ways of working.
I know before I trained as a psychotherapist, I knew how um, I don't know the right words, but I knew I needed somebody to help me understand myself so I could get some healing. Um, and I went into many different types of psychotherapy, if you like, and perhaps they weren't even psychotherapy when I think of encounter groups and some of the early groups that I went into in the service of understanding myself. And I eventually found an individual therapist to help me on that way. But I do know in those early years that I tried many different creative ideas and techniques out, which did help me. One of them, which really helped me, was drama therapy. The use of drama and the use of psychodrama and the using of many creative techniques. So I remember going to a place in a Greek island, and it was called Skyrios, and it had a psychotherapy part to it. And I went to this is when I was about 33 or 34, way before I went into the world of psychotherapy. I remember going to a workshop by, I think it was Christine Helgathorpe. I'm not sure if she's even alive now, but it was using psychodrama to aid healing. And that really helped me a lot.
Yeah,
Art therapy really helped me a lot. So I think that the psychotherapist needs to think about different ways of meeting the client using different disciplines.
absolutely. Yeah. I think for me, I went through a spell of doing equine guided therapy using horses and walk and talk therapy, being outdoors in nature. That always works well with me. It's not always conducive with, I don't know, every client sitting in a therapy room. Sometimes they need to be able to get up and move rather than sitting in a chair.
There's many different, but we have to be guided by our client,
Absolutely. Yeah.
not hoist our ideas onto them. That's the biggest trap, Jackie, when therapists foist their ideas, usually out of contract. There's not even a contract for it, because they think, I don't know what they actually think, but they think that leads to effective psychotherapy, and it will never do if they aren't collaboratively with the client.
Yeah. Do you think clients expect us to just do the typical, therapist sat in a room
I don't think they
to have
think
an
about
hour? Do
it.
they know
I
that there
think,
are alternatives?
well, they may or may not, but I don't think they even think about it. I think most clients come into therapy because they want to be fixed,
Yeah.
and they usually trust the therapist um, to to perform that function. I don't think most clients even think about the different approaches there are around. I would think in a professional career of 38 years, I could probably count on my hand how many clients, and I've seen a lot, thousands and thousands of clinical hours, but I could count on my hand, and I'm, if that, maybe only two or three, how many therapists have said, well, what were you trained in, or who trained
Yeah.
you? They don't ask those questions.
No.
They are focused on this person can help me and can fix me. And they don't think, and this is no disrespect to what you've just said, I don't think they think about some of the things you just mentioned. They may, for example, come from that place in the first place, walking therapy, walking equine therapy. So they expect that type of therapy. But in my limited history, well, expansive history, really, I don't think they think about it.
No.
I think they're guided by the therapist.
So there's a dilemma there, isn't there? If they're guided by the therapist, and then it's really important that the therapist doesn't, do you know what I mean, impose a certain type of therapy
Yes, that's
on
what
the
I'm saying.
client,
That's
then
exactly what I'm saying.
yeah,
That's exactly the way I'm saying. The most important thing, and I am a real believer in this, and we could go back to what was called the relational turn in the 1990s, where you went from individual psychotherapy and the idea of modalities ruling the day to the idea that the major curative factor for clients is the relationship
yeah,
between the therapist and the client. I think I always believed in the importance of, way before in the 80s and 90s, before what's so-called relational term came about, the importance of relationship, because without that being in place, I don't think we get effective psychotherapy. But you're right, there is a dilemma. If the psychotherapist puts theoretical dogma in front of relationship and collaboration with the client, effective psychotherapy won't happen.
yeah,
If somebody is, I don't know, wants to follow art therapy, drama therapy, equine therapy, whatever it is, and, without collaborating and contracting for that, I think it's a road to problems.
So what do you think is important to put in your therapeutic toolbox then?
Well, one, the belief in the relationship. So I don't know if you call that a tool or not, but
Yep, yeah,
I think yourself is a really important, and the relationship and the focus on that is really important. If I had to pick, well, I've done a lot. This is what I'm saying. I have the luxury of practicing for 38 years. So, I think very integratively. So art therapy, I really like. Many of the methods to help people get to the child ego state, like art therapy. Another one I like is narrative therapy. In
Yeah.
other words,
Yeah.
storytelling.
Yeah.
Hypnotic induction, I would use a lot. Drama therapy, sculpturing. I like all these tools. And interestingly, as I talk to you, they're nearly exclusively tools I use to help a person get to their unconscious, because I believe that's where the healing is.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does take the focus off things, like you were saying about getting in touch with the child ego state. When we're doing art therapy or do you know what I mean, modeling or using Play-Doh or I don't know, whatever it is,
And play, yeah.
we instantly get in touch with that younger part of ourselves and somehow opens up the gateway to accessing a whole different persona.
Yeah, and I think that's so important.
Yeah.
So nearly all the tools I would put in my toolbox, whether it be narrative therapy, whether it be art therapy, whether it be drama therapy, whether it be sculpturing, whether it be hypnotic induction, all those and narrative therapy, they're all geared towards helping the person looking into their or reflecting into their internal world, rather than the external world of staying in the here and now.
Yeah.
So I'm a developmental long-term psychotherapist. So I've always thought that way. So I've built up a lot of tools to help me help clients move into areas they may be unaware of themselves.
Yeah. And it's how we move them into those areas.
I think one of my favorite is a technique from Gestalt psychotherapy called two-chair technique,
Yeah.
often used now when people talk about parts therapy, PARTS therapy. The idea that we have different parts of the self, which is not new. Might call it parts therapy. It goes back, oh God, century to drama therapy and Gestalt therapy and transaction analysis, but sometimes called parts therapy. So the idea of through role play, asking people to play different parts of the self, and that's the essence of two-chair technique. I like and
Yeah.
use a lot to help people get to different parts of their self and to eventually, hopefully, integrate the different parts of the self.
Yeah. Which again is something that I've seen on training courses run by you and in my own training or whatever it is. The impact of it is yeah, really powerful to observe it in that situation, as well as having spoken to the people that had it, and that it is transformational.
Yeah, I teach it a lot.
Yeah,
Teach it,
absolutely.
and I teach it alongside what is called redecision psychotherapy. Another book I didn't even get to in the last podcast, but which I had, called The Power in the Patient, which is the idea that the power is always in the patient, not the therapist. And another book, Redecision Psychotherapy, by the same authors, called The Goldings, talk about the extension of two-chair technique leads to helping the client making new decisions from where it was originally made in the child ego state. So all these techniques I use as I'm talking, I realize, are all based at helping people, going backwards
Yeah,
too, because I believe it's in the past where the challenges need to be met.
yeah. And then,
Take
the,
destiny of their future.
yeah, and to have the ability to redecide, I think is
Mm.
so powerful. But we need to go back in order to do that. Yeah.
And I started off by saying myself. You remember saying the relationship.
Yes.
And
Yes. Put yourself
yeah,
in the toolbox. Yeah.
I think to learn how to use yourself in the role plays and how to use yourself in the drama therapy and how to use yourself in the transference in the aid of the client is really important.
Yeah. And, I know it always sounds like I'm blowing your trumpet, Bob, but you do use your whole self when you're
Yes.
doing
Yeah.
it. Your voice, your body, like everything is used with you. You're a master of dropping your voice and the impact that has on a session.
So I think learning to use yourself in many creative ways is very important.
Yeah.
So developing that in the toolbox, besides all the other areas I've talked about, I really, in another age, I think people would have called me a narrative psychotherapist, because I really like to use storytelling. I really like to use visualizations in the form of helping people change.
Yeah. Metaphors and things.
All
Absolutely.
the time. I mean,
Yeah.
really, metaphors are so important to help decode the unconscious process.
Yeah. It is. It's bypassing all the protective mechanisms that we've got, that when we can do that through whatever mechanism,
Yeah, it's
like you
so
say, you're accessing a different place.
it's protective back then. So uh, protectiveness is really important to think about. But or stroke and often where the decisions are made to protect the self, thank goodness, by the way,
Yeah.
around the area of trauma and abuse, sometimes gets so fixed in the decisions about script and life that we need to help people perhaps update some of their decisions. And that's an important part of psychotherapy, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Bob. I've really enjoyed that one as well.
Yeah, I did as well.
So following on from this one, what we're going to be discussing in the next podcast is jumping out of the toolbox into the unknown. So now we've talked about what's in the toolbox. Now we're going to talk about jumping out of it into the
How
unknown.
fabulous. Into the unknown. How we work with the unknown is really the title of that podcast.
Yeah.
We should talk about it. We should have it just like that. Working with the unknown and uncertainty of life. What everyone's afraid with. That's what it's about. And
that's the only thing that we can be certain of.
Yeah. And yes. And it's our 199th podcast.
It will be, yes.
And what's the 200 one?
What's the 200 one? You're testing me now. Let's have a look.
Well, we can talk about it next time. We have to talk about
Is there a minimum or maximum time limit for therapists to consider when working with clients?
Yeah, 200
Maybe
years.
it's 200 sessions.
I think that led us to say that, but what a wonderful podcast.
Okie dokie.
Wonderful podcast that will be. Okie dokie, see you then.
So until next time, where we're going to be looking at how we work with the unknown.
Yeah, that's
Sounds a bit spooky, really. That one, Bob. Okie doke.
Oh,
take care.
Fantastic. Bye-bye then. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Therapy Show, Behind Closed Doors podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. We'll be back next week with another episode.